All the rave right now has been AI, using AI to create copy, which, let me tell you, there is an amazing way to use ChatGPT or Capsho. If you haven't heard of Capsho, it's absolutely amazing to really shorten the amount of time you're spending on your copy. One of the things I'm going to say right now is it's great for inspiration. It's great for getting started. But would I recommend copying and pasting and saying, hey, I'm done? No, that's a big fat no. So today I asked ChatGPT the question, what are the most common questions asked by podcaster? And it spit out 10 questions. So I am going to rapid fire answer these 10 questions for you according to what ChatGPT thinks is the most asked question. All right, let's go. Welcome to the podcast about podcasting, where you guessed it, we're talking all things podcasting, but not just in a sense of strategy of how to launch, grow, and monetize your show. Of course, you're going to get that. But we're going deep into how podcasting can actually help you build your community, build your confidence, and if you're willing to lean deep into this platform, it can be the ticket to the life of your dreams. Because it'll inspire you to go deeper, to get to know yourself. And as we know, success starts from within. If you are ready to stop being a ripple in this world and bust out your tsunami of change you know you were made for, it's podcasting for your soul. I'm your host, Jenn Dragonette, so let's dig in. Okay, I love AI for inspiration because here's the thing. When you are putting out content, whether that's weekly, bi-weekly, or if you're crazy like me and you got 3 episodes going out a week between the 2 podcasts and you're a producer, there's a lot of content that has to be created, right? It can feel so overwhelming. And we get stuck in this funk. We get stuck in a rut. And this is one of the main reasons that people pod fade out. Well, first off, you do not need to be creating all the content you think you need to be creating. You need to be optimizing and making sure that the content you are creating is magnetizing people into your audience. But I want to talk about ChatGPT and Capsho. They both are amazing tools to get that creative juice flowing, especially when you're stuck or when you're in a rush. It's always easier to start with some words on a page than it is to just sit there staring at a blank page. Even though you've recorded the episode, sometimes taking audio to text is quite a chore. And I see this happen so much where people don't end up using show notes. They don't end up putting things on a blog. They don't optimize their podcast on their YouTube channel. And that is where your searchability is. You are leaving the potential to be found on the table. So let's rapid fire when I asked ChatGPT what the most common questions asked by podcasters were. Here are the top 10. Number 1, how do I start a podcast? Well, number 1, you come up with an idea, you validate your idea, you niche down until it is painfully niched. Then you come up with a platform and you create the foundations of your podcast. That's the short version. Then you obviously post it to your podcast host and you distribute it to the podcast players. There's a lot that goes into it, but that's the short of it. Number 2 question that was most common is, what equipment do I need to get started as a podcaster? Well, there's some controversy here, and I see so many people recommending things like the Yeti microphone, the Blue. And for me, when I do recommendations, I recommend things like the ATR 2100, the Samsung Q2U, because those are great entry-level microphones and they're dynamic, which means you won't have as much editing because they will not pick up as much noise in the background. It doesn't make your voice as rich, but for me, the lack of having to edit as much is totally worth the drawback. The one thing I'm going to say is that you can go super basic and use your headset that's attached to your phone and record directly into some of these apps. But really make sure if you're doing that, you're recording in some place like your closet. Question number 3, how do I come up with a podcast topic? Well, this goes back to your why. Why do you want to share? What is the purpose of your podcast? What do you love? What do you love to talk about? Is this a passion project? Is this something to monetize? What is it that you want? Coming up with a podcast topic, even if there's other podcasts out there. Again, this is why in the beginning I said niche down till it's painfully niched. That is one of the best ways to come up with your podcast topic. And then you can branch out from there. But in the beginning, and I had this problem. So many of my clients have had this problem. But if you don't niche down, you're not going to get found. Podcast searchability it's not an if you build it, they will come. You must be painfully niched. And the cool thing about being niched that much is that you can even pick up sponsors if you want earlier than with the thousands and thousands of downloads. So number 4, what is the best way to promote my podcast? I get this all the time. And so many people think social media is the best way to promote their podcast. And I'm going to say, wrong. Nope. Because you've got to think about when we go over to social media, we are looking to numb out. We are looking for a different experience. Most of those people aren't looking to learn something. Most of those people aren't stopping and then leaving that platform to go somewhere else. So the best way to promote your podcast is somehow in the podcast app, whether that's showing up on other people's show, being a guest expert for someone else's show, or paying for podcast player ads. That is the best way to promote your podcast. If you already have a warm audience on social media, by all means, share. But it's not going to get you anywhere very fast. So number 5, how do I get more listeners to my podcast? Well, that goes back to promoting your podcast. You got to get in front of people. And I truly believe that guesting and ads are the fastest way to get that. How often should you release a new episode? At minimum, once a week, consistently, same day, same time. More is better, but train your listeners to come back at that time for you. How long should your podcast episode be? Question number 7. This, again, you got to know your audience. I know most of you like the quick hits. You like that this show is normally under 15 minutes. Sometimes when I have guests, we go much longer, but I try to keep this to a quick hit because you're doing something. Maybe you're doing the dishes. You're going for a short walk. You're taking a 15-minute stand-up exercise break. You're busy. You don't have time to listen to me ramble on for hours and hours. But if your audience is different than that and they're looking to fill that void for a long period of time, then you need a longer podcast with more stories. So it's really about your listener. How long do they have to listen? Are they commuting? Are they dropping kids off at school and coming back? How long is that person going to be able to be engaged and get what they need from you serving them? So number 8, how do I interview guests on my podcast? This is great. Start having conversations. If you take away, it depends. I've listened to so many shows. Let's back up for a second. I've listened to so many shows where you can tell it's structured questions that the person says, how did you get started? How did you get your next step? And you can tell there's this pause. The person talks, and instead of having a back and forth conversation, it's literally them answering the questions. That's fine if you enjoy that. But for me, I think of podcast interviewing as a great way to get to know someone, to get new information out, and to have a conversation and create a true connection. I do some research on the front end of interviews, but most of the time I do minimum. I look to see what's going on. I look to see what's new, but I don't want to know a ton about them because the less I know, the more intriguing questions I will ask them, and my audience will soak that up. So how do you interview guests? However you want. But it's a conversation. You're 2 humans, 3 humans, however many humans on a microphone talking to podcast land. It's just a conversation that serves others. It's a conversation. It's like being a fly on the wall of a conversation between two people that actually serves you and moves you forward in your life somehow, or entertains you. Maybe you have a show that's all about entertainment. Number 9, how do I monetize my podcast? All right. Well, for the baby shows with the tiny audiences, I honestly think that your own products and services are probably the fastest way, whether that's consulting, coaching, network marketing. That's probably the fastest way with a small audience. Again, if you are painfully micro niched, you can start looking for sponsorship. There's things called crowdfunding. You can ask for crowdfunding. You can monetize through memberships. You can monetize through private podcasts. There are so many ways that you can monetize your show. It really goes to what is it that feels aligned with you? What do you currently have? If you're somebody that currently has a signature offer, a course, a mastermind, a one-on-one intensive, by all means, story sell that. Story sell during your podcast and have that lead into that program, that offer. There's just so many ways to actually monetize a podcast. It's a little crazy. And the final question, number 10, is how do I measure the success of my podcast? This is a hard one because podcast stats aren't that great. So you have to go back to your why. Why are you doing this? Because if you're doing this to make a certain amount of income and you're actually making that from your show, that's a pretty successful podcast, even if you only have 20 listeners. But if those 20 listeners are bringing in your minimum amount of money, then great. If you're someone who likes the numbers and it's an ego boost to see thousands of downloads and that makes you feel good and excited to move on and to share your services, your gifts, and your magic with the world, then you can measure it through there. There are a ton of apps out there that can rank your podcast. Right now, this podcast is moving up the charts. I think we are officially ranking in the top 10% of podcasts worldwide, and that is of the 4 million indexed podcasts. But like I said, of those 4 million indexed podcasts, if you listen to Travis's interview last week, there's only 200 to 250,000 that are actually active. But still, to be in the top 10% of that's pretty awesome. My other show's in the top 5%. But is that what's paying my bills? No. Is that helping me get discovered? Honestly, I have no idea. But I know my show is growing consistently. So you have to figure out what success looks like for you and your show, because it is different. It's different for every single person. I have a client that she is monetizing her podcast like crazy. And I mean, millions of dollars are coming in from her show. But she doesn't feel it's successful because it's not growing in the leaps and bounds she feels it should be. So she has attached the show's success to the downloads, to the number of people listening versus the number that's coming into her bank account, versus the number of people that she's able to connect with and share stories with and build her network. And it can go either way. There's no right or wrong. For me, my podcast, my original podcast, like I said, for a year, we were only getting 30 downloads. But you know what? Those 30 downloads were meeting my minimum income requirement. So that to me was success. So how do you want to measure your show for success? Is success big download numbers and finally getting those sponsorships? Heck, who doesn't want 10 million downloads a month? And that's crazy. I'm not even sure. There's probably a couple podcasters out there, but having at least 1 million downloads a month, you can easily get sponsored and be making 5 to 6 figures in just sponsorship revenue. Is that when you see success? So success is an inside job. It depends on what you. So for question number 10, how do I measure the success of my podcast? Well, how does it make you feel? How does it make you show up? Are you excited to show up? And does it bring you the satisfaction you desire, whether that is heart satisfaction or bank account satisfaction? So thank you, ChatGPT, for those 10 questions. If you have any questions of your own, please reach out. You can send me an email at jenn, and that's JENN, at jdragonette.com. And I just look forward to having these conversations. If you are stuck, you can always grab the free 30-minute podcast CPR audit. This is where I spend 30 minutes coaching you. No, this is not a sales call. If you want to work with me after the 30 minutes, great. If not, you still have a roadmap to move forward for the next 30 days. In 30 minutes, we create 30 days worth of content and we tweak what is missing. We resuscitate that internal fire. We resuscitate that passion, and hopefully we resuscitate your business. So if you are ready to go a little bit deeper, you can grab a podcast CPR audit, and that is at podcastcpr.com. And I hope to see you there. You will be seeing more and more of those audits coming out on the show, so you can see how I work through things. My true goal of this is that I don't want podcasters to keep fading out. I don't want so many broke podcasters. I don't want so little podcasters being successful. I want this to truly be the cure for PODFADE. So if you're ready for a little CPR on your podcast, grab it. podcastcpr.com. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Go out and make today amazing, because you are beautiful, you are wonderful, you are worthy, and you got this.